We are talking obsessive-compulsive disorder. 1 million people in the UK are now diagnosed with the condition. Dr. Amir is with us as well, alongside fitness expert and author Shakira Akabusi, who says that OCD, Shakira, it affected every single part of your life. When did it start, though? When did it actually start to become a problem?
So I really noticed sort of like an increase in all of my symptoms during pregnancy and motherhood. And I think in a way it was a way of me trying to get an element of control over a situation that just felt really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really sneaky thing about obsessive compulsive disorder, because in the moment it feels like it's helping you feel calmer, but actually, like, particularly now, looking back at that time in my life, I can see the damage that it was doing in, as you just said, you know, in all aspects of my life.
Everything.
Yeah,
absolutely everything. So at its worst, how would it manifest itself? What would happen?
So OCD can come in so many different forms. I had intrusive thoughts and then tapping and counting. So I had a thing with numbers. And the thing, again, with OCD is that it feels instinctive. You know, I can now rationalise that as someone who's out of that time, and I can rationalise things. But it feels so real, you know, when you're experiencing it. So for me, I had tapping and counting, you know, the stereotypical OCD you might see in a film, stepping over a crack in the road, that sort of thing. And at my absolute worst, I mean, it's such a different time in my life now. But at that time, I mean, it was taking me about 4 hours every night to get to bed. I was working once a week in London, and I had to walk from work to the tube station, which took about 7 minutes, and that 7 minutes would take me about 3.5 hours.
Why would it do that? Did you have to just keep going back and forth?
I had to keep going back, stepping over cracks in the road, you know, turn around, walk past that building, tap, 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 stand here for 5 minutes. You know, it was just so all-consuming. And I don't think anybody really knew how to help me, and so the spiral just kept going, and it was really extreme, you know. And at first I would try to hide it, you know. I'd be sitting here now tapping, tap, 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 or tap my foot, and then it became really visibly clear that I was distressed.
Well, if it's taking you so long to get anywhere, and there was one time where you couldn't even, you were supposed to go on holiday and you actually could not get from just to go and check in. You just couldn't do it.
So I think that's when it all came to a head. We were meant to get on a flight. I had a particular intrusive thought about flying, and we got all the way to the airport, and I had my son, who's now 10, who at the time was 3.5.
Right.
And we got all the way to the airport, and I remember the door opening to the airport and seeing all the cracks on the floor, and I just thought, I can't even make it to the check-in desk, let alone actually on the flight. And so we had to cancel the holiday, explain to our 3.5-year-old why we weren't going, and then go back home. And that was really the point where it just came crashing down on me how much this was impacting my relationships, my work, my parenting. And you know, I can sit here today and say I have no OCD at all anymore.
But how did you get help, though, Shakira? How did you manage to get help?
So it was a combination of things. The first thing was that where I was working in London, they ran a 15-minute anti-anxiety hypnotherapy session.
Oh, that's very forward-thinking of them.
It was,
really
yeah.
good.
And thankfully they did it, because it really changed everything. And after just that 15 minutes, I walked from work to the tube station in 7 minutes. And I remember phoning my mum, and I was like, I've done it in 7 minutes. You know, I hadn't done that in 2 years.
Sure.
And it's not to say that then everything was plain sailing.
No.
You know, it was almost like 1 step forward, 3 steps back, 1 step forward. But it planted the seed that recovery is possible. And then with a combination of hypnotherapy and then exercise, I think for me, the key to recovery was that I had to learn to differentiate between what were the anxious, intrusive thoughts and what was my instinct. You know, I said it was quite an instinctive feeling. And when I did the hypnotherapy, or if I would do just, you know, we say exercise, it doesn't have to be in the gym or going for a run, just going for a walk, exactly,
Take
stretching.
the dog out, you've got one. Yeah.
It just allowed the thoughts in my mind to slow enough that I could differentiate between what was instinct and what was anxiety. And then I was able to handle them a little differently.
It's absolutely remarkable. And Amir, I know that a lot of people will be watching and recognising some of the symptoms that Shakira's talking about, because there's a world of difference between, you know, some people say, oh, I'm OCD, and it just means they're a bit tidy. Do you know what I mean? It just means that they like things to be neat and straight. That's not what we're talking about here. So what would your advice be to anybody who's worried after listening or wants to get help?
Yeah. So obsessive compulsive disorder are these kind of frequent, unwanted thoughts that come into your head and make you perform behaviours repetitively, which interfere with daily life, which Shakira has described so well there. The best thing to do is recognise it, because some of those thoughts can be intrusive and really troubling. Some of them can be violent and sexual in nature. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's part of an anxiety OCD picture. So get some help. Speak to your doctor. I know it's hard. We can refer you onward for talking therapy, cognitive behavioural therapy. There is a weight on those things, but it's better to be in the system than not in the system. And we can refer you to some online resources that you can be getting on in the meantime. But just recognising it and having a diagnosis actually helps as well. So do speak to someone.
Yeah, you've got to. You've absolutely got to. And I know you did, but you know, don't just accept. If somebody doesn't accept what you're feeling, you can always get a second opinion, can't you?
Absolutely. I tried so many different, therapists. It wasn't just necessarily that type of therapy.
Sure.
It depends on who you're speaking with.
Absolutely, of course it does. And you've got to put the work in as well. As you said, there's no overnight cure, but you recognised it, and it's fantastic that here you are. Here you are, and looking so good. Thank you so much, Shakira.
Thank you.
It's great to see you. I'll see you really soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Anna Mira.